Welcome to the Infuse Compassion podcast, hosted by me, Amy Quisenberry.
And me, Mark Carpenter.
We are on a mission to make this world a kinder place for us all by bringing healthier human connection to communities, families, and organizations of all types and sizes.
Our goal is to create stronger relationships, more inspired teams, increased trust, and improved results.
So let's get started with more ways to infuse compassion into our world.
Welcome, Compassionators. We're so glad to have you with us for another episode of the Infuse Compassion podcast. I'm Mark Carpenter, here with my fabulous co-host, Amy Quisenberry. Amy, what are we talking about today?
Wow. One of the commitments that we made to our compassionators out there is that we were going to use this platform to really expose myths about compassion being soft. And one of those areas that we're going to dig in today to really open minds, hopefully transform perspectives, maybe plant some seeds, is about compassionate communication. And so we've got an acronym that we're going to share, we're going to walk you through, and even a really great example of what it looks like. So you want to dig in?
Oh, and Amy had me on communication when we got into this topic. My background, I have a degree in communication. I spent 20 years of my career working in corporate communications. I teach people communication skills. So when she mentioned this topic, I was all over it. And Amy is brilliant at coming up with these acronyms and these ways of thinking about it. And so, Amy, I'm going to put it back to you. What is that acronym that helps us think about what does compassionate communication look like?
Yeah, so the acronym that I came up with is TACT. TACT. Really simple, but really powerful. Before we get into the acronym, I want to talk about the actual definition. There's a few different definitions out there, but here's one. I'm just going to read it off the screen. A keen sense of what to do or say in order to maintain good relationships with others or avoid offense. Great. Let's do that, right? Let's avoid offending each other, and let's work on maintaining good relationships. Wouldn't that be nice if we had something that could help us do that a little bit more in our world, right?
Yeah, and at the same time, I want to emphasize that when we're talking about avoiding offense, it's not avoiding the conversation. Because a lot of people grew up in the same environment that I did, where everybody can finish this phrase. I'll bet you can do it. If you can't say anything nice,
don't say anything at all.
Don't say anything at all, right? And so we feel like that's the way to avoid offense. But if you think about it, if there's a problem and you don't say something about it, that is not compassionate. That is not kind. Mm-hmm. In an effort to be kind, we go into silence mode and wait till the problem builds to the point that it's so big that you have to talk about it. And then it's harder and it comes across as less than kind. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to get that with that definition of tact, that we're not saying that we're avoiding difficult conversations. And Amy, you made a great point about why we avoid conversations when we were talking about this earlier. I want to put that back to you to bring into the mix.
Yeah, having been in HR for 20 plus years, an expert in the performance management realm, one of the things that I've seen over and over again is that employees hear critical feedback for the first time in an evaluation, a performance review conversation, right? Maybe they heard it 6 months ago, no conversation since, and then they're hearing it again, or they're hearing it for the first time. This is not the place for somebody to hear something for the first time unless this action just happened. Just meaning in the last week. There should have already been a conversation. And so when I've spoken to leaders and said and asked, help me understand why you didn't have the conversation with them prior. And a lot of times what it boiled down to is their discomfort with, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to make them feel bad. They're trying so hard. I see them struggle. So, in their struggle, what we're actually doing is we're leaving them alone in their struggle. By not being brave enough, we're literally making it about us and how we feel about them instead of saying, you know what, my employees deserve better. I'm going to show up better, whether it's a friend, a family member, a coworker, a team member, a direct report, a manager. Sometimes we have to manage up, folks, right? But to be able to be brave enough and say, you know what, I'm gonna have an important conversation, and because I believe in this relationship and I want us to be better, I want us to be stronger.
And you made just such a key point right there too, about why we have those conversations. Because your motive going into the conversation is what makes the difference. If
Mm-hmm.
my motive is, "Ooh, I want to point out your flaws and make you look bad," I'm being compassionate by bringing this up. That's not really compassionate. But if
Mm-hmm.
it's, "I want to help you grow, I want to strengthen our team, I want to strengthen our relationship," and that's on the personal side as well as the professional side, that kind of motive will drive you into those conversations rather than away from those conversations.
That's right. And I want to also add to this point that you're making is that leaders, it's our responsibility for the company's best interests to have these conversations. Your leadership, the executives, your shareholders, they're relying on you to have these important, critical, and we're going to show you compassionate conversations.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to get too far away from it. I want to get into that acronym of
I was thinking the
TACT
same thing.
because
Yeah, yeah.
we've left that hanging for people out there, I think, long enough. So, Amy, share with us what those four letters in TACT, TACT, stand for to help us remember what compassionate communication looks like.
Yeah. So, tact, it's a two-way conversation, right? This isn't just somebody coming in and saying, hey, this is how I feel about something, turning around and walking away. This is a two-way conversation. Okay. So come in, going in with an open mind, being curious about whatever it is, not already having your mind made up, but if there's something, hey, listen, there's something I've been feeling, there's something I've been thinking, there's something I've been observing. I'd like to talk about it. Do you have a few minutes, right? To come in curious, get their buy-in on doing this right now, unless you already have a set meeting with time. But this is a two-way conversation. Ask questions that help the person not, you said something a few minutes ago that was like a gotcha of, you're going in with the intention of, you're doing all of this bad, but hey, listen, we talked about XYZ before. I haven't quite seen the change. Can we talk about what some of the barriers you may be experiencing? Right? Two-way conversation. Now, in two-way conversation, what this also means is it's not just the person coming to you. The other person needs to show up as well. You need to participate in that conversation.
Yeah. And we need, when we're initiating the conversation, we need to create the space for other people to make it a two-way conversation as well. Because sometimes we get uncomfortable. Again, this is about our own fears. When we get uncomfortable at those conversations, we say, well, I'll send them an email.
Mm-hmm.
I'll send them a text. And then I will have communicated to them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not compassionate communication. That's a dumping ground more than anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
so creating that space to say, how do you feel about this? I love that you use the word curiosity. I teach people all the time. Curious is the right emotion to have. Curious is always better than furious.
Yeah.
And so if you can go in curious, it leads you very naturally to ask, well, what am I missing? What am I not seeing here? And don't assume that other people will understand that you're coming in with good intent. Go
Mm-hmm.
ahead and tell them what that good intent is. So when you're having that corrective conversation, lead with, I want to help you improve. I want you to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to work well together. I want the team to be wildly successful. Whatever it happens to be, put that good motive out on the table so that they don't assume that they're just in trouble or that there's something wrong.
You know, that time, the absence of conversation, we can find ourselves in a tailspin of what's not being said. There is so much opportunity for the train, as they say, to go off the rails in the absence of clear conversation, right? Of a direct and straightforward. And this is what we're going to talk about. When we talk about compassionate communication, it is being direct, it is being straightforward, but you're doing it in a way of setting clear expectations, right? So let's continue moving forward, because we're getting into the A. That's actionable. Okay? So before you even get in the conversation, what's the action? Is there a behavior that you're wanting to change? Is there something that you're wanting to start? Is there something that you're wanting to stop? What is the action? What is the outcome that you want to happen as a result of having this conversation? What's the action? And to get really clear, which I just took you to the C. So the T is two-way, the A is actionable, and the C is clear. Okay, but before we go into the clear, I think you have some stuff you want to add on actionable. Let's dig into the A some more.
I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, and they were talking about a conversation that they had with their mother, and it was kind of going rant, and he was frustrated about it. And I said, well, what did you want to come from that conversation? And he went, what do you mean? I said, well, okay, you were talking about this topic. What did you want as an outcome? What do you want as a way forward? He paused for a second. He went, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not even sure why it's important to me, and I'm definitely not sure why it's important to her. And so we sometimes do that. We get in there and say, this is bad, this is wrong, there's something happening here, but we don't get clear in our own heads about, so what's the next step? Where do we want to go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't know going into the conversation exactly what that next step is, but you've got to identify what that next step is before you get out of the conversation.
That's right. That's right. And that brings us again to that clear, because clear, again, is a two-way street. You may think you're being clear in how you're communicating to somebody. But again, this is why the two-way is so critical. This is the foundational component. So for the person that you're talking with, for them to follow up and say, this is what I think I heard you say. Your expectation is that moving forward, you want me to do A, B, and C. Did I get that right? Yes, you did. Perfect. And so I liked the acronym TACT so much because it was so simple and clean, but all around this is a big old I, which is intentional, right? I mean, intentional is absolutely key to this conversation of, you don't just walk up and have a conversation. There should be some preparation where you're thinking, what can I do to create a two-way conversation? What are some questions I can ask? What is it that I want them to action as a result? How can I be clear? How can I confirm with them that they've clearly understood me? And do I clearly know what they need from me to deliver what I want? Two-way,
Yeah.
right?
And at the same time, we don't want to use that preparation as an avoidance or a stall tactic to say,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, I need to think about this more. I'm going to let this sit for a month and a half before I actually come address it, which actually leads to the second T in your TACT acronym.
I was like, seriously, what a beautiful segue.
I was setting you up.
I wonder if you're a master communicator, Mark. How did I get so lucky to co-host a podcast with a master communicator? All right, that's timely. Timely. Oh my goodness. To have the conversation not 6 months after it's happened, not a month and a half after it's happened. The challenge is there's a lot of things that can happen in the time between, and you're going to share a quote with us, I believe. In fact, sorry, just share the quote because I want to dig after you share the quote. I want to dig into the impact of timeliness a little bit more. But I love your
Yeah,
quote.
I love this quote. It comes from Joseph Grenny, who is the co-author of the book Crucial Conversations. And he says, the health of a relationship, team, or organization is a function of the average lag time between when somebody sees a problem and they say something about it.
Mm.
Let me say it again because it's kind of a long, complicated quote. The health of a relationship, team, or organization is a function of the average lag time between when somebody sees a problem and they say something about it. And
Mm-hmm.
so the point there is the shorter that time frame can be between when a problem is identified and when you have the conversation about it, the healthier the relationship is going to be, whether that's a family, a team, a couple, a working group, or an entire organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, that just always has resonated with me.
And this is why I wanted that quote to be shared because this is so powerful. If we just take the human dynamics of I'm feeling frustrated about something, as we hold on to that and that behavior, whatever it is, continues, do we think our frustration increases or decreases? If somebody is not delivering to the set expectations in a work environment, in a family dynamic, do we think that them not following through is going to help the organization, as you just pointed out, is going to help the family run smoothly, or do we think it's going to hurt? This is why we say this uncomfortableness of not having the conversation. It can act as a volcano. And what happens when a volcano erupts?
Creates all sorts of other problems.
That's right. And so, in a timely manner, sometimes, again, going back to the intentional, like Mark said, we don't want to stall, but to sit down and say, there's a conversation that needs to happen. And I'm going to take 20 minutes today and figure out what's the best way for me to approach, not to have the conversation, but to approach this person and talk about it. And that timeliness is absolutely key. So the TACT acronym, I hope you all dig into it, you know?
Yeah. And your thought there about don't wait and let that fester and grow
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of a statement that you made to me just a few weeks ago. Don't have the conversation for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to the two-way. A lot of times when we let it sit and fester, we're having the conversation on both sides in our head. But it's not a two-way conversation because we're assuming what the other person is going to think, say, or do. So I want to just hit that acronym one more time. The first T in TACT is two-way. The A is actionable. The C is clear. And the last T is timely. Did I get that right?
You got that right. You absolutely got that right. I want to go to the thing that I said to you a few minutes ago, only because I think that was a really important point of a barrier that could prevent us from having an important conversation. And I just want to take a minute. I was a recruiter for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. And this was years ago. And I was a technical recruiter. So I'm looking at the CVs of engineers and all sorts of people, wide range of people in the technology realm. I myself am not a technology person. I found myself looking at resumes. I was working at a staffing agency. I would stare at these resumes 20 minutes. Should I call them? Does it look like a match? Is it a match? I'm not sure. I was doubting myself. One day I said, Amy, just pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone. Stop rejecting applicants because you're not sure. In 2 minutes or less, you have the requirements of the position and you have a resume in front of you. You should have the ability in 2 minutes or less to be able to say, this is worth a 5 minute conversation. Yes or no. That's it. And when I made that transition, my um, my metrics went through the roof. I became the highest grossing recruiter in the agency quarter after quarter, year after year. And this isn't just about recruiting. This is about sales. This is a net cast so far. Don't have the conversation for somebody else. I don't know. Should I call my friend? Should I invite him? Oh, they're busy. I don't know. Just pick up the phone, send him a text, ask them. You never know.
Yeah.
They may surprise you.
And I love the timing you put on that. You spent 20 minutes looking at a resume when it could have been a 5 minute phone call.
That
A
could
lot
have
of
been
times,
4 phone calls.
yeah. And a lot of times people will say, oh, I just don't have time to do all this deep, compassionate communication. Well, think about how much time you're spending elsewhere.
That's right.
My snarky response to that is usually, oh, okay, so you have time to fix all the problems that are coming from not communicating later, because that's what's going to happen. So I want to go through, and as we wrap up here, because we're kind of close to the end of our time, I want to give people an example of this TACT acronym at work. And I thought of this example that came between Amy and I just a few months ago as we were putting together the Infuse Compassion into Companies conference. Now, one of the things you need to know, Amy and I have only known each other for about 10 months, and we've only met in person once. And so all of our relationship has kind of been back and forth virtually here. And it's not like we've got this long relationship. So from there, Amy, I've kind of set it up. Amy, I want you to jump in with kind of the trigger moment that said we need to have a conversation.
Yeah, there were some emails going back and forth, a couple meetings that happened, but no direct conversation between you and I like this, voice to voice. And there were things that I was seeing that just seemed different. And I thought, did I upset Mark? Did I offend Mark? Did I do something that has hurt his feelings? I just saw a change. Whether it was real or not, that's what I saw. And I did what? I mean, you remember what I did better than I do.
Yeah. She sent me a little text that said, hey, do you have time in the next couple of days that we could just spend 20 minutes having a conversation? And I said, sure. How about, and we set up a time where we could talk. Now, I'm gonna kind of bring my side of this in too. This was a time where it was really busy for me with a bunch of things that were going on, and so I had gotten into this mode of making really quick, terse responses to emails, very often over my phone, where I don't take as much time to write out what I'm really thinking. And so we got on a call together. So I want to emphasize that TACT is not necessarily in order, that TACT, because I think one of the key components of this was that it was timely. Amy did not let this sit and fester in her. She didn't let this sit and go, oh, Mark's upset with me. Well, he has no right to be upset with me. I don't know why he's thinking that. Why? And let it build and build and build and build, because that turns into other problems. Instead, she just said, we need to have a conversation. And when we got on the conversation, she said, I want us to be able to work really well together. And I'm seeing something that might be getting in the way. And she just called out a couple of the specific messages that I'd sent. And it brought to my mind, oh my goodness, that is probably how that came out. And that's not how it was intended. And so it gave me an opportunity to apologize and say that's not the intent on that. And we just had a back and forth a little bit about, what we were looking at, what we were seeing, and what was really happening within each of us. And we came to an actionable solution on it. In fact, I'll throw it back to you for the actionable solution.
It was the key moment from my perspective in the conversation where you said to me, Amy, it's really important for me to have regular check-ins. When I'm working with somebody, I want to know that we have regular check-ins to really come together and talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, are we on track, are we off track, and just to connect. I said, great, perfect. And we set up a frequency that worked for us, and we've been able to maintain that. There are times that we're like, hey, we don't need to meet today and we're good, but we have that frequency, we have that touch point, and it has been smooth sailing. But if
Yeah.
we wouldn't have, what kind of wedge, what kind of fester, what kind of disconnection, we may have never made it to this if
Yeah.
I would have pushed my feelings down and ignored them. We have to honor our feelings. We have to honor, you know, that's an important part of the tact and the two-way as well.
And that was one of the things that really impressed me about Amy, was that she was willing to step into that conversation that I didn't even know was an issue. I was blind to it. Now, the other side of it is, as you were communicating that, I had the choice to say, how could you be thinking that about me? I don't know what's wrong with you. But I looked at it and went, oh, yeah, I can see that's a logical thought process too, based on what had happened. And so I had to be willing to have the two-way communication on my side to say, I want this good outcome too.
Mm-hmm.
We're on the same side here. Amy is doing this so that we can get to a good outcome. The short-term outcome was just a good conference that we were trying to put together. But the long-term outcome is to have a relationship where we could work effectively together.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And so one of the things that we like to do in our podcast is at the end, we like to, put out something for you all to practice, to use, to integrate into your world. And so I'm just going to say, hey, think about one person in your life that you would like that relationship to be a little bit better. And how can you use the TACT acronym? How can you use compassionate conversations to bring you closer together, to really invest some time and, just making things better for you and that person?
And I love that as an action for everybody to take this week. In fact, we'd love to hear any successes that you have with that too. I'd love to have you connect with us and let us know. You can put it into the comments on the YouTube channel or send us an email at infusecompassionpodcast@gmail.com and let us know some of the experiences you've had by taking that tact approach to having compassionate communication. Thank you for joining us again on our podcast. We love having you here with us, and we look forward to another episode next week. Any final thoughts or comments, Amy?
Thank you, everybody, for showing up. We really appreciate it, and just keep infusing compassion into the world.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Infuse Compassion Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, please share a review and like the podcast so other compassionators can join us. Until next time, let's all do something each day to infuse compassion into the world. For more information on our guests, see the show notes. For more information on Mark and Amy, go to infusecompassion.com.